A very good afternoon to all the dignitaries present. I'm Dr. Nanekar Singh. On behalf of Mahatma Gandhi State Institute of Public Administration, I welcome you all to the 6th in the series, sessions of Fridays at MGSIPA. Fridays at MGSIPA is a unique platform for the congregation of eminent personalities from different fields like civil service, academics, defense, judiciary, journalism, health, civil society, etc. The last 5 sessions have been well received by the august audience. So ladies and gentlemen, for this session of Fridays at MGSIPA, we have invited Dr. Karan Avtar Singh, IAS, retired, Chairperson of the Punjab Water Regulation and Development Authority, who will speak to you on the topic, Union Budget, Between the Lines. In conversation with him will be Mr. Atul Gandhi, Senior Partner, KPMG, India. May I now request Shri Amit Daka, IAS, Director, MGSIPA, to escort Dr. Karan Avtar Singh, sir, and Mr. Atul Gandhi, sir, to the stage and introduce our esteemed guests.
A very good afternoon to all of you. So, as you all know that we had union budget yesterday, and to read between the line for yesterday's union budget, we are fortunate to have among us Dr. Karan Avtar Singh. Dr. Karan Avtar Singh is IAS of 1984 batch, and he has illustrious career in civil service, and he served as Chief Secretary Punjab between March 2017 to June 2020. Sir is serving as Chairperson of Punjab Water Regulation Development Authority as of now. And as far as my experience goes with Sir as his junior colleague, I always found that he is more of a scholar, less of a bureaucrat. So you are the apt choice for the today, sir. Sir is alumni of Delhi University, from where he graduated in economics and law, and he did his doctorate in economics from University of Michigan. To have conversation with Karan sir, we have Mr. Atul Gandhi with us. Mr. Atul Gandhi has over 35 years of work experience and is managing partner of KPMG in India and in charge of Upper North practice of KPMG. Mr. Atul founded a CA practice in January 1987, and since then I think he has put more than 35 years in this field of accounting, corporate law and taxes. And since 2009 he is working with KPMG, and he is a very active person across the industrial forums and consultancies. So we have a very good panel here, and we hope that we will be able to read a lot between the lines. Welcome, Karan sir and Atul. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and a warm welcome to this esteemed and august gathering of senior government officers, industry leaders, economists, and all our budget enthusiasts. To start, I think a small quote which I like is, budget is like life. It's all about balancing priorities, balancing what you have and what you need, deciding where to generate resources, and allocating resources to your goal, and like life, planning for uncertainties. We have with us Karan Avtar sir, and we are excited to be hearing his views and interpretation of the economy, specifically in relation to India and the northern region. The man present here, as Amit sir said, practically needs no introduction. However, he is an academician, economist, and a well-respected bureaucrat who had multiple charges in the government of Punjab, Union government, and the Chandigarh administration. In fact, when we were doing the ISB summit, in 2013, we didn't realize that we had a PhD from Michigan, having taught there from 1992 to 97 as the Principal Secretary Industries and Investment Promotion. When the investment summit and Invest Punjab was actually conceptualized, he was one of the architects, and we held that summit in ISB in December 2013 with the participation of India's top promoters who probably constituted 50 to 60% of India's GDP on the dais on that day. We had 30 to 40 top CXOs of corporate India at the summit, where Anirudh Tiwari sir was announced as the first CEO of Invest Punjab. Karan sir has been at the helm of 12 states and UT budgets in their preparation and their consolidation. Today's session aims not only to unlock the key highlights of the interim budget, but also foster an engaging discussion which will be interactive, where Karan sir will be lending his experience of 3 long decades, illustrious career in delving deeper into the government announcements and analyze its implications from diverse perspectives. He would also give a snapshot of the world, India, and the region's economy. Like a skilled surfer riding a tidal wave, India's economy in 2023-24 has navigated a dynamic global landscape, propelled by its domestic strength. India boasts of a massive domestic market of 1.4 billion people, home to 5th of the world's youth demographic, 5th largest economy in the world, and a vibrant ecosystem. However, choppy international waters threaten to disrupt the smooth sailing. Geopolitical unfavorable conditions have affected the US and other major economies. From 2021, China stocks stand to lose $4 trillion. 2023 saw China's economic juggernaut sputtering, with a major culprit being the implosion of its one untouchable real estate sector. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe is limping back from being a hopeless continent due to so many downs, and it had fortunately saved a lot for the stimulus for these troubled times. It is slowly absorbing its gas/energy crisis. Such global headwinds have undoubtedly impacted India's economic journey, and the nation's inherent strengths and proactive policy measures can charter its course towards a robust and sustainable future. With this background, may I present Karan sir for his presentation.
So with Atul's permission, I'll desert him for 10 minutes and then join him back. Ladies and gentlemen, as Atul said, the global economic scenario doesn't look too great. And so we are wondering whether, reading between the lines of this interim budget, the Indian economy will do well and how well. Before I go on to the budget, let me just recap for all of us the global scenario. We read every day about the Ukraine-Russia war. We read about the Hamas-Israel conflict. What worries me more are the developments closer to home. Burma, Afghanistan, even Sri Lanka, it's in crisis. The Maldives, etc. These countries are really part of our subcontinental culture, region, and they will impact us much more perhaps than the other global trends. The tensions in the South China Sea, Taiwan Strait, they could be replicated on our northern borders. So I think we have lots of developments which will pan out perhaps more quickly than we expect. And these could put a lot of pressure on our national defense and security outlook, and therefore on the union budget. And according to me, that's not being reflected so far in the union budget. Our defense outlay in this interim budget went up only 5.9%, which is actually less than the nominal growth of GDP of our country. So it would be perhaps correct to say that we are de-escalating defense expenditure. That could be worrying just a few years down the line. That said, So what I'll do is I just have 6 slides, and on each slide I'll give you 2 positives and 2 not so positives or negatives. So the positives are very strong. They're like the bright sunshine today. The negatives, I think, are like the rain and hail and snow we had yesterday, like a blessing in disguise, which we should try and make the best of. In fact, just before I came on stage, my friend was asking me whether we'll have enough water this coming year because of the dry spell in Himachal. So let's hope for more of the rain, snow, and negative aspects which can propel our economy forwards. So the 2 positives I have for you are the GDP growth rate, perhaps the best in the world for any major economy. Depending on which estimate you prefer, we are touching about 7% of growth. And in our sectors, agriculture in the last couple of years has been doing exceptionally well. Even industry has done well, despite the counterpoint, which I'll come to, on exports. The services sector, of course, is our star in our growth story. Inflation is perhaps going to look much better this coming year than it did last year. So let's give credit to the central bank and to other central banks across the globe for doing a good job. There are 2 negatives we can see. One is on the international trade front. Exports have been stagnant for way too long. There have been reasons. There was the COVID pandemic. There was the global slowdown. There are these conflicts going on. But if we have a national strategy which wants to take advantage of China plus one, or wants to make sure that India integrates into global supply chains, then perhaps we are not doing too well on this front. The imports also have been going down. As a result, the trade deficit as well as the current account deficit look better, but that's not a great sign, because you can always have a much better trade deficit if you don't import and don't consume. So to me, self-sufficiency, autarky is not a good thing. Human civilizations have grown from individual or self-sufficiency to interdependence and specialization of labor. Everyone in this room today is specialized in some way. 30,000 years ago, we would all have been hunter-gatherers, all the same. So as a nation, as a state, as a district, as a city, too, we create wealth by specializing and by trading more. So to me, international trade for any country is a very good early indicator of its future wealth and prosperity. Therefore, I worry. My second worry is the tax to GDP ratio. It's been stagnant in India at around 18% of our GDP for a very long time. The central tax to GDP ratio, which I have up there, is about 11 or 12%. If you look at developed countries, the overall ratio for the whole country could be 30% to 50%. We have a vision to be a developed nation by 2047, so we really need to work hard on how to improve the fiscal capacity of government, and most importantly, how to increase the number of Indian citizens who have the capacity to pay tax. They need to earn enough to pay tax. So I think this is a key indicator of how many people are not only moving out of multidimensional poverty, but moving into the middle class, moving into a lifestyle which they have some purchasing power, and hence they pay GST, they pay income tax, etc. 3 big highlights which show the way forward in terms of increasing tax to GDP. The unified payment system, it really works well. It's perhaps the best in the world. Our direct tax collections have outgrown indirect tax collections, which is always a good sign. I won't go into the economics of that. And our GST collections also, it's been a great transition. In the last 6 years, our economy has been unified in terms of indirect taxes, and we've stabilized to a great extent in terms of the revenues being generated by GST. So the next two slides, I'll ask you to be patient because these are fairly obvious highlights of the budget. But after those two slides, again, we'll try to read between the lines. So this was an interim budget. It's fairly brief, bare bones, no changes in tax rates, and that is going by a tradition in our democracy, very healthy tradition. It's not legally required. So neither the Constitution nor any law says that we need to have an interim budget prior to a Lok Sabha election. So this is just a healthy convention. And definitely this budget sets a good precedent in terms of that convention. However, it has some very important new announcements which I think will go a long way. The most important, which I'll come to later, I feel, and which my friend Amit Thakur also agreed with, is the research and development corpus of 1 lakh crores. I think that's a big plus for taking our national economy forward in terms of being a leader in technology, which we are not today. But before that, let me go through the 4 aspects of the budget which looks at the bottom of the pyramid, the poorest in our country, who deserve the first place in terms of attention of the Union Finance Minister, which I think she has done. So on poverty alleviation, we've been doing very well. The PM Swanidhi Yojana, it's focused on the informal sector. And the DBT also is by and large focused on people in the informal sector. Comparing with China, our informal sector is way too large and it's a drag on the economy. It's one reason why our tax to GDP ratio is much lower than China's, although China's tax rates are much lower than ours. So the Chinese government has a win-win, very low taxes, very high revenues. We don't, because most people don't earn enough to pay a tax. Looking at skills and youth, the Skill India mission has come of age. The Mudra Yojana, 43 crore loans. That's huge. The PM Shri has a much higher budget the coming year. Higher education, there's a big change, especially in our region. If you travel in Punjab, Himachal especially, every 20 kilometers there's a new university campus. And it's not a small enterprise, it's fairly huge. There are 10,000 students, there are 2,000 faculty, there's a couple of 100 crores invested there. This is a new vibrancy, which when I was growing up, there were no private universities. So this is huge, and the government is also focused on it. For farmers, so these first two, again, are what I see as the big positives in our economy and in the budget. The next two, not so positive. On farmers, I feel that the government of India and state governments in our country do not have a coherent strategy or policy for agriculture. So this is a big weakness which we face. If you're in a business dealing with agriculture, I think you're always trying to firefight. And when I worked in government, I could see that the agriculture side, and Punjab is definitely the most important agriculture state in our country, was firefighting for reasons which I feel are due to lack of strategy to address the issues in this sector. And that gets reflected here. We have PM Kisan Yojana, which is the government of India's recognition of stress in the agriculture sector, but I don't know if it really achieves anything beyond a transfer of payment. The Fasal Bima Yojana is doing much better than it was, and this is a ray of hope. The ENAM, in my view, has been a non-starter. In fact, again, I have colleagues here in the audience who know much more about this. So this is a mixed bag. On Nari Shakti, women's empowerment, again, the northern part of our country is one of the world's hotspots for women being way behind men for the gender gap. And that hasn't been improving despite the efforts that we've listed out here. So ending with some positive, the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme has a much higher allocation in this interim budget. It's both a positive and a negative. It's a negative in the sense that this shows that we expect more people to be underemployed in our country and therefore to benefit from NREGA. The other positives, semiconductors, the blue economy, which is aquaculture, fisheries, and the production-linked incentive scheme for manufacturing, which in its early days is showing lots of promise. Lots of foreign direct investment has been stimulated by this scheme, and it has a 50% higher allocation indicated for the next year. Of course, we'll come to know for sure only in July when the full budget is presented. So, having taken you through the micro aspects, let's spend 2 minutes on the macro side of the budget, which is really, I think, across the globe, the financial press, the bankers have appreciated what the Union FM presented for the reasons that I've listed out above. The borrowing of government is well in check. The fiscal deficit, which is what the government borrows, which is expected to be 5.8% this year till March, is likely to be much lower next year, 5.1%. And the following year, it's projected at 4.5%. Now, this 3-year projection, actually it's a 2-year projection, is now law in India. There is an act of parliament called the FRBM, the Financial Responsibility and Budget Management Act, which requires the Union Finance Minister to present a 3-year forward picture of her budget. So I think that's a very good thing. And some of you may feel this is too good to be true, but looking back at previous medium-term projections in budgets, they've not been too far off. They've been fairly accurate, except, when you had COVID, obviously, things went awry. So then, if you look at revenue receipts, expenditure, gross tax collections, the point I want to make here is that all the estimates in the Union interim budget are fairly conservative. When you look at tax revenues, you get the feeling perhaps this forecast is on the lower side. The tax revenues will actually be better. When you look at expenditures, you get the feeling maybe the government could have spent a little more. So I think there's lots of room for maneuver, which the Union Finance Minister has left herself for the year as it rolls out for the Government of India. So I think that is a very good sign. In the middle, I mentioned capital expenditure. It's increased by 11.1% for the next year. Last year, the increase was a huge 36 or 37%. The revised estimates actually show it's going to be less, maybe 27%. But then you can expect that, when you give a 30-odd% jump, it's not easy for various government departments to actually increase their expenditure that much. So overall, a positive. The decrease in major subsidies is a positive. The transfer to states linked to certain reforms. So, a state government basically has to improve its power sector, improve renewable energy, etc. So a very good amount of 1,30,000 crores has been earmarked for transfers to states, which achieve certain reforms and which also achieve their revenue and borrowing targets as set by RBI and Government of India under the Constitution. So I think we have a lot of positives, a lot of discipline, which we see here. I'll go on to certain sectors and do my positive and not so positive comments for you. You may or may not agree. So on infrastructure development, I've already stated my view that on agriculture, and this is not new, this is, ever since I've been working and maybe before that, we don't have a coherent national policy, and that shows up in these schemes or highlights. You have nano DAP, which will follow nano urea to be promoted. You have an oilseed scheme. When I joined service, there was an oilseed scheme. And when I retired, there was yet another oilseed scheme. But throughout this entire 36-year period, India has been a net importer of oilseeds. So yet another scheme. The fishery scheme, Matsya Sampada, is actually doing very well. So that's a positive. On tourism, tourism in India has boomed, especially in the last 3 years. I'll come to that later. The airports and airlines infrastructure, the road, rail infrastructure, the massive growth and the massive investment in hotels and tourism has really helped. However, I do believe that it's not something which has been too dependent on government promotion of tourism itself. So tourism industry would depend on what government does for infrastructure, not for tourism itself. So we have some schemes for iconic tourist centers. We have interest-free loans to state governments. Okay, but the important thing is port connectivity and airports, which is where I feel the budget needs to have stressed even more. The last 2 points I have are logistics and housing. These are strong points of the government. On logistics and road connectivity, the Bharatmala project, it's historic. The location we are sitting at today, within 50 kilometers of this location, in about 3 years' time, you will have 4 new expressways. From Parwanu, Kalka, beyond Zirakpur and Derabasi, then from Banoor, Kurali to the Himachal border, then Roped, Chamkaur Sahib, Ludhiana, and then Mohali, Sarhand, Malerkotla, Ludhiana, Bathinda, Malerkotla, Bathinda, and links to the Delhi, Amritsar, Katra expressway. And if you look at the speed of work, all these are, you can check on Google, they're actually under construction. The overbridges are being made, the structures are being made, the land has been acquired. So this, I think, is phenomenal. It's perhaps in the world, even if you look at China, perhaps now India has overtaken China on highway development. So this is going to be a big game changer for investment, for business, for industry, for tourism, especially in this part of the country, Himachal, Punjab, Haryana. The Awas Yojana, internationally, governments have subsidized and promoted housing. Europe had to do it after the Second World War. The US did it after the Great Depression of 1930 in the New Deal of 1936. Singapore did it after they got independent. China has done it perhaps as the biggest single infrastructure project in the whole world over 40, 50 years. And in India now we are seeing signs that this is going to be a big program. And in my view, it needs to be much bigger. We need a national housing bank, which could be a subsidiary of the RBI, etc., which needs to pump in trillions of dollars for housing for people who cannot afford the expensive bank loan which today you need to buy a house. Again, long story, I'll cut it short here. My last slide on sectors, on sustainability, climate change. So the first 2 boxes are not so great, and the last 2 are where I think great work has been done in India and in the budget. Ayushman Bharat, which is the health insurance for all, to me looks like an opportunity lost in the last 6 years since it was launched. During COVID, when I was still working, I was surprised to see that a very small fraction of the poorest Indians actually used this scheme when they were in the worst of times, when they needed hospital care. And in the last 3 years, I haven't seen a big uptick. If you look at the numbers, the budget allocation hasn't increased much. It's 7,200 crores. And in terms of absolute numbers, for a population of 140 crores, this is peanuts. So it seems to be something which is going nowhere, and it's something which I think, if you cannot afford the very expensive private medical care which we have in our country, it's something which is very important. So in terms of what the government should be doing for the poor, I would say this is number one, and this is not being done. And I would like to actually see a future budget when the tax to GDP ratio goes up, where you have at least 2 more zeros after this number. That's when we'll be able to tell every poor Indian that don't worry, if you're not well, use your health insurance card, you'll be looked after. Today, somehow that's not happening. The National Green Hydrogen Mission, I think this is weak simply because the technology is still to be tested. So is it wise for a government to spend money on a technology which is still not proven? That is the question here. But given the government's commitment to climate change and net zero carbon, perhaps they are erring on the safer side and saying, let's go ahead with this. So on climate change, the next 2 schemes are really doing well. They're fairly mature and they're growing very fast. Renewable energy. Solar in this part of the country has done very well. There's been a hiatus for the last couple of years. I think this interim budget shows that that hiatus will soon get over, and there'll be fresh rounds of bidding for solar energy plants. And the fraction of renewable energy in our energy grid is going to jump up again. There was a big jump in the last decade, and there's been a kind of flattening out, and hopefully it'll go up very fast again. There's coal gas liquefaction, there's blending. Blending again of petroleum products and natural gas is something which all of you know has been very successful in India, and no other country I think matches us now. 5 years back, Brazil was ahead of us, but I think now we are the world leaders in blending bio-based ethanol into our petroleum products. And this definitely has been possible with government budgetary support and also the public sector oil marketing companies' support. So this is one case where you could argue that having a public sector helps, and it's not always good to privatize everything, because when it comes to such kind of negative externalities where petroleum causes extraction of fuel or a resource which you cannot replace, it also causes carbon dioxide emissions. The private sector cannot address this issue. It's only government which can do it. And in the Indian system at least, and in the Chinese, the government is always most comfortable subsidizing a public sector undertaking and not so much a private undertaking. I'll come to FAME, electric vehicles. It's been a failure, partly because of the lack of trust between the private sector manufacturers and the government, or the government officials who are responsible for actually dispersing that check. So that's an aside from a bureaucrat. The solar and EV schemes. One of the biggest announcements in this interim budget was that 1 crore households will get solar, rooftop solar, and they'll get 300 units free. This is huge, and I'm not very clear how many years it'll take because the budget doesn't say so explicitly. I'm presuming it's either 3 years or 4 years, and so the allocations in the July main budget will reflect, I'm sure, a lot of money being spent on solar rooftop schemes. So, my final slide, looking ahead. So I have 4 issues. These are based on the 4 strategic concerns which the Union Finance Minister expressed in her speech, and which she's been doing consistently, at least for the last 3 years, if not 4. The first you can link to China +1, or making India an international hub for economic activity, manufacturing, services, etc. So what's missing? To me, the most important thing missing, it's not to do with the budget, is the lack of multilateral trade treaties that the government of India has signed. India is not a member of any vibrant, not even one vibrant regional trade agreement. We are a member of SAARC, the South Asia Treaty. It doesn't work mainly because Pakistan and India don't talk to each other much. We are not a member of two very important trans-Pacific treaties, one promoted by Japan and the US, one promoted by China and ASEAN. We are also not moving further on our comprehensive economic commitment with ASEAN. There was a move by ASEAN that India should become a more full-fledged partner of ASEAN. We didn't sign up. To me, this withdrawal from international trade is a bit like Brexit. And we can all see how Brexit has hurt that country. Well, they're more developed, more open, so it hurt them more. But if we also want to be as developed as a UK or a France or a Germany or a China, I feel there's no other option but to give the benefit of international trade, exports and imports, to every Indian worker, every Indian student who's looking for a career. All of you, especially I see people in the first two rows who are very experienced on investment and business. The first thing when you go to China, for example, and talk to them about investing in India, they say, please tell me about your taxes. What income tax do I have to pay? What GST do I have to pay? And what is your import duty? When you tell them about import duties, the response I got was, why do you have import duties? And I asked them, don't you? They said, no. Since 1994, when Deng Xiaoping was he was called vice chair, I think then, we don't have import duties. Okay? So that's the thought. Because signing these international trade treaties requires us not to have import duties. Quickly then, so this is close to my heart, free trade. I'm an economist. Quickly on the other points, we need to spend more on defense. To me, it's very obvious. If we want water for our country, I also, in the state government, I work on the water sector. It comes from across the Himalaya. Do we have a treaty on water with China? We don't. Do we have one with Nepal, who's a friendly country? No, we don't. Do we have a treaty with Bhutan on water? No, we don't. So, we need this. And with China, my firm belief is, knowing their culture, that to talk to China, we need to show our strength. And perhaps we need to show our teeth also sometimes. And that can only happen if our defense budget is much, much larger than what it is today. Whether it's the Navy or the Air Force or the Army, there are experts who can talk at length about this. But that I don't see in this budget. And I don't see an indication it's going to happen in July. Research and development investment and patents, we are laggards. But that 1 lakh crore corpus, I think, is a very, very positive sign. Technology transformation, especially in manufacturing, I picked up one number, the number of robots installed in 2021. India installed about 1% of the robots globally. China installed more than half the robots globally. So that's the gap between China and India. And of course, we need world-class connectivity. I think we are getting there, part of the way at least. Viksit Bharat, we want to be a developed country. Our per capita income is $2,500 a year, approximately. I don't know what the target is. It's not clear from the budget. But suppose it's $10,000 a year, which is less than where China is today. So that's 4 times. And if we want to do it in 23 years, by 2047, then we need to up our growth rate from the present 6% to 8%, maybe 9%. So how is that jump going to happen? That's where I think the national strategy needs to work on. Similarly, our Human Development Index, it's below average. Out of about 200 countries in the world, we are only at 132, maybe 129. A lot of work needs to be done on that. Net zero emissions and climate change, our commitment is 2070. Actually, we're doing very well in terms of renewable energy. We are well in line to achieve by 2030 the 40% renewable component of our energy sector. So that looks good. But after that, I guess it's going to get harder, and we need to work on more forests in India to capture carbon. We need an electricity transmission grid which will look very different from today. So there's huge investment required there. It's a huge business opportunity. It's going to be one of the world's largest grids based on distributed renewable generation, and ultimately a lot of storage will be required for renewables also. And last but not the least, we need carbon positive agriculture. Agriculture today in India, especially in the surplus states like Punjab and Haryana, uses a lot of carbon, fuel, fertilizer, etc. How do we move to more carbon positive agriculture? There are examples. The state of Sikkim, for example, the Chief Minister of Sikkim had announced 5 years ago that Sikkim will be an organic agriculture state. And they're almost there. I'm told 90% of the produce in Sikkim today, agriculture produce, is organic. And definitely that's, it's a small state. Can a big state like Haryana or Punjab do it? It's a question mark. Can the whole country do it? Bigger question mark. My last point, which the Union Finance Minister mentioned, and which I think is very relevant for our part of India, she mentioned developing Eastern India, because that is the laggard part of our country today, and historically it has been, even if you look back for a century. And there are many things she listed out: road connectivity, agriculture, food processing, air connectivity, organic farming, hydropower. For hydropower, there's a huge announcement outside the budget by Government of India for Arunachal, looking at 30,000 megawatts of hydropower generation from that state. So there's a lot being done there. My food for thought for all of you as I close is that for Punjab, for Haryana, for Himachal, each state is very different. Each state has its own issues. I feel each state needs a development strategy for 2047 and what it needs to do, where the money is going to come from. What should the union budget provide for the state? And more important, what should the state budget look like? So this dialogue between the union and the states is, I feel, very important, and something which in the future the citizens and the government need to build on. So Atul, I've taken a lot of time. Let's get back to you and to the delegates here for their views and comments. Thank you.
That was awesome, sir. You spoke from the heart and you were candid. And to take advantage of your presence here, I thought we have a lot of people wanting to interact with you and make it an interactive session. So I have the CIA Chandigarh incoming president, Anurag Gupta, a leader in, recycled textiles. And I'd like, why don't you start with a question that you have for sir?
Good afternoon, sir. And your presentation was very enlightening. Very crisp points, made it much easier to understand the budget and look at it in a made it very easy. And the analysis focused on the domestic as well as the global context. Now, one thing that I was wanting to have a discussion here, that we are talking of India a 30 trillion economy by 2050. The Prime Minister has promised net zero 2070. And we also know that whatever humans consume, we take from nature, and when we take more than we need, it harms nature. So trying to become rich itself is something which destroys the nature and is not good for the environment. So when we say sustainable, we are limiting ourselves to net zero. So how does India look at becoming a 30 trillion economy and being able to manage the impacts on the environment? We are already seeing so much impact on climate change, and how do we balance the idea whether we should really become so rich, and if we do, how will we remain sustainable?
Thanks, Anurag. That's a very big question, relevant, and a very political question, because and it's strategy, because there's a trade-off here. Do you want to grow rich, or do you want to stop consuming carbon and stop emitting carbon dioxide? And yes, there's a huge trade-off. The developed world is facing it. The US, being the largest carbon emitter, has not so far done a good job of controlling carbon emissions. China is the second largest. They have plans in place, but so far, if you look at the trajectory of carbon dioxide emissions by China, it's still going up. And by 2030, because our commitment is 2070, China's is 2060. Most developed countries have committed 2050. So these are very tight timelines. So here's my take, which you may not agree with. As an economist, if you want people to consume less of something, you just tax it. Put a tax on carbon or on carbon dioxide. Will people consume more of it then? No, I don't think so. They'll consume less. And why should government tax it? Where will that money go? Use it to reduce carbon emissions. Use it to build a renewable transmission grid, for which there's hardly any allocation today in the union budget. So, but these are tough political decisions. So the problem I see is that if we leave it to each individual country, no country may do it. If we leave it to individual businesses, barring enlightened souls like you, nobody else may do it. So do we need an international treaty on carbon emissions? Yes. Is it there today? No. We have the Paris Treaty, we have the Dubai Round. Can it be done? Yes. Why I say that? Just 2 years back, the OECD signed a treaty on minimum corporate tax rates of 15%. It took them 2 decades to work it out. But we only have like 2 or 3 years to work out this one. But I think it can be done. So if instead of just nationally determined targets, you had binding national targets under a treaty, and then governments were to push the private sector with policy, with money where it's required, and say, you got to do this, here's the money, do it, right? You have to install a new boiler which costs you twice as much, here's the subsidy, do it. So short of that, I don't see it happening. So these are very tough political decisions which every nation on earth, especially China, India, USA, Japan, and EC, we have to take these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have a lot of promoters from various this thing. I'd asked Mr. Bhavdeep Sardana, who's the CEO of Sukhdeep Starch, a leading player in commodities, to air his views. Please, can I ask a question?
Thank you, Atulji. Sir, a very enlightening presentation. I picked up your last sentence, dialogue between center and state. And sir, I have been having considerable business interests in North India. There are 2 points where I feel the budget could have done more, or a little bit more micro planning could have been done. Firstly is the rice stubble issue, which troubles most of northern India. It's not only Punjab's problem, it's there in Haryana, it's there in parts of UP. Linking it to biogas, and therefore renewable energy, and therefore a grid network to produce maybe even green hydrogen, I think maybe you could talk about it. How do we achieve it? How does the state, being an administrator, how would a state talk to the center? How would the center listen to it? It's a problem which has existed for many years. Secondly, we all know Punjab is a landlocked state, and the allocation towards Bharatmala, linking it to Gati Shakti, is a welcome step, but I feel northern Punjab, Doab and Maja area, I think could do a little bit more. So again, how does the dialogue happen? How does the basics of it happen? So the micromanagement or the micro connectivity, the going beyond tertiary connectivity in these areas where we cover our clusters, where we cover our MSMEs and make them viable to beat the inland freight cost, which is the highest in the world. So these are my 2 points.
So thanks, Bhavdeep. The second question first, that's the easier one. I think states need to relook their connectivity, road connectivity plans now, because Bharatmala is a game changer. There's a plus in it for states. 10 years back, the state had to, out of its own resources, finance all state highways. And starting with Madhya Pradesh and Punjab, states had gone for BOT state highways because of the fiscal stress. All that expenditure now is being taken care of by the National Highway Authority of India. And perhaps that's a good reallocation of responsibilities, because with the sovereign guarantee, NHI raises bonds at much lower interest rates. So that's good. Now that every state has a massive national highway network. So today, some states have more national highways than they had state highways 15 years back. So that having happened, now the state government needs to look further down the hierarchy of road networks and say, what are my small intercity roads looking like? Which of them needs 4-laning? And you travel in Telangana, Odisha. In fact, Punjab is much better, because in those states, when you get off the swanky 6-lane highway, you just have potholes and a kacha road. Right? So yes, it's a huge issue which I don't have an answer for. But definitely, I think Punjab, Haryana also are very well placed to address it compared to other states. Your other question on biomass and parali, as we say in Punjabi, it's a huge issue. What I learned is that the current regime for bioethanol doesn't make the paddy straw to ethanol business viable. So perhaps an additional push or an additional subsidy is required there. I'm sure this would work. So if there is to be an additional subsidy for bioethanol, I'm sure it will work for lots of other agro residue across India. And so as a carbon strategy, perhaps that's what the government of India needs to look at.
Thank you, sir. From FMC, there's the companies, the headlines say today, Kisan to Kirana. So I have here Taranjeet Bhamra, one of the most successful startups in the agri sector. And Taran, if you can just speak something about the agri sector and the startup ecosystem in Punjab and how you achieved it, and a question for Karan sir. Thanks, Taran.
Thank you very much, sir. It was such a pleasure listening to this amazing, insightful discussion. What I see is a huge potential for exports as well as for processing to happen through this region. Also, what we see this is that most of the transportation of raw just happens to be to Delhi, and from Delhi it moves all forward. With Bharatmala and other things coming in, direct connectivity to ports and creating an infrastructure for exports out of Punjab, and Haryana and Himachal and Jammu. All of that needs to be linked together. While there is no mention of that in any of the budgets, at least I have seen that. So what would you suggest so that this economy takes, so as I said, Sukhjit sir just mentioned about this entire maize diversification is also very important for the state. As we see that the entire maize ethanol is to be used for biofuels. We know that BPCL, etc., they're all looking for such diversification to happen, and it has not happened to the scale that is being envisaged. So what is your suggestion for making this corridor of, I clearly say Zirakpur, for example, because most of the food moves to Delhi, and from Delhi it goes to, you know, any processing, and what is the potential for us to put this as a corridor from here to exports? And second, what is your suggestion for diversification, utilizing all of the concepts that are there mentioned in the budget? And the third is this R&D thing that you had mentioned. There was 1 lakh crore of agri-infra fund which was not utilized to the full. How do you see this R&D for startups? I mean, there are startups waiting to, you know, use the R&D funds for better tech, from chipsets making to semiconductors to everything. How do you think we startups would be able to utilize this?
Before you give me a fifth question, let me try to address
Yeah,
those four.
there were many, but I stopped
One, I will
at 3.
defer to the business heads. That's the maize to ethanol one, because food grains to ethanol, I think Government of India has its concerns. So let's leave that aside. On the R&D fund, my understanding, because it's an interim budget, the documentation is still to come. I think the main budget will have detailed documentation. My understanding is that it's both for corporates and for universities. So it's not really for startups. So it's for long-term projects. And perhaps in the, in the biotech sector, you have BIRAC in Government of India, which looks at both small and large projects. So this, I'm told, is going to be for very large and very meaningful research and patents to be developed in India by, the IITs, the universities, corporates. On connectivity and export, so that's two different things. So the road connectivity, rail, there are 3 new rail corridors in the interim budget, which I've mentioned. So that's very positive. But when you export or trade, you need financial connectivity. When you export, it takes 60 days to reach that client, and you have uncovered foreign exchange risk for those 60 days. Either you or your client will take a bank hedge contract. What we don't have in India, especially for agriculture, is a vibrant commodities exchange or a forward market. So that hampers export. It's okay for spot trade. Even for spot trade, I did mention that ENAM, which is a linkage, national linkage of agriculture markets, to me, it doesn't really work. I mean, to me, it's simple. It's like an Amazon for the agriculture sector. So it shouldn't be difficult. And the fact it doesn't work is frustrating. So to answer your question, it's not to me so much the physical infrastructure, road, rail, airports, well taken care of. It's the commodities markets, which in India are not liquid. That has to do with government policy. Government of India, because of the food security situation in the country, for example, currently has banned exports of wheat, non-paddy, non-basmati rice, and a couple of other agricultural commodities. So if you're an exporter or importer which is in the rice complex, it could be rice bran oil, for example, you're hit by these policies, right? So I mentioned twice that we in India don't have an agricultural strategy, and perhaps you're suffering because of that, and so are so many others.
Thank you, sir. I now have a question from a very senior bureaucrat, sir, Mr. Gupta, please. And may I request the others to just restrict for one question per this thing, because sir has a lot of questions. Thank you, sir.
We are talking of ethanol biofuels. So in the same chain of issues, as I was going through the newspaper today, so I just remembered there was something called Global Biofuels Alliance. With great fanfare, it was announced during the G20 conference. 17 countries, 19 organizations, 3 countries, Brazil, USA, and India. I think we are kind of promoter countries. So ethanol, everybody knows from the something edible, molasses and all that. In 1984, we made an attempt in Punjab government that cellulose should be converted to ethanol. A project was given to Punjab University. Then I heard about algae to ethanol. So my point is that when we have announced something in G20, so I don't find any mention in the budget. And the second point is something called Deccan, DECCAN, Deccan High Level Principles on Food Security and Nutrition 2023. So they find mention in the outcome document and chair's summary 2023. So these issues on global biofuel allowance and Deccan principles, at least I have not been able to find any mention in the budget. So if we are to give the lead to the whole world, I think some conscious attempt must be made.
So I'm only aware of the first one, biofuels. There is a line entry in the budget on the government support for ethanol and the mixing in CNG. In fact, the budget speech mentions that not only petrol and diesel, but CNG and LNG also will have ethanol. And there are technology issues, as you know, so you've been Food Secretary, Government of India. There are technology issues in that. So that does find mention. The other one, perhaps the Government of India is working on it. So let's wait for the July budget.
Thank you, sir. We have amongst us Mr. Hartek Singh, the Chairman and Managing Director of Hartek Group, who actually has done a lot in renewable, and renewable has a huge allocation in this budget, sir. So Hartek sir, if you are there.
Hi, sir. Good evening, sir. Well, I was going through the whole presentation, and fortunately, we stand in the better part of the industry and the economy because, yeah, we are in the renewable space, and having the growth what we are all seeing in India, we take this pride of being a Mali-based company. We are today done grid connectivity of close to about 8 gigawatt, which is almost about close to 5% of the total capacity of this country, which is we are standing today at 180 gigawatt. 2030, we're looking forward to a 500 gigawatt of capacity, which the government of India is looking forward. Sir, my question here is that despite of that huge opportunity and challenges which we are definitely facing, despite of the opportunities lying there, the challenges, I still see that there is a big gap between the state and the center, cohesiveness and partnership in taking this kind of a renewable space forward. And without the state participation, it's going to be a very big challenge for the government or the center to really take it forward. That's my, first take, which I'd like you to, react on. How do you see this as part of the challenge?
Okay, I did mention that, in your sector, last 2-3 years, there's been a plateau. And yes, you're right. The central government has put in, a lot of money into the sector. But as you know, power is a state subject, and it is the state Powercom which has to sign a power purchase agreement with you. And to go beyond a certain level of renewable in the mix, the transmission grid needs to be replanned. So I think we are at that stage in many states in India where the state Powercom needs a lot of investment to be made to replan its transmission grid, to up the capacity to input renewables from diverse locations. And that's been holding back some states. So you're right, the ball is in the state's court. But that is also being addressed by Government of India in terms of the transmission grid planning for the whole country.
Thank you, sir. We have from Himachal a very prominent promoter, Mr. Anil Sehgal, who's the founder and chairman of MT Autocraft and has gone heavily into an EV mode. He's also the promoter of Paras Healthcare in Panchkula. So may I request Anil sir to ask a question, please?
Yeah, thank you, Atul. Very candid presentation, sir. I just wanted to have two questions. One was a smaller one. One came from your presentation only. Other was there's a lot of talk about the EV growth in India, but in the ground, nothing much has happened so far. Internationally also, there was an initial thirst. A lot of companies, it reached to a level of 19% of the EV growth. But then suddenly the things are on a standstill. There are a lot of capacity which is lying idle internationally also for EV components as well as EV vehicles. Going forward, how do you see things happening growing in India? That's number one. Number two, if the press is not here, I would like a fair comment from you. There was a line mentioned by you that Manrega budget increased from 60,000 to 86,000. As an economist, do you think it is a good thing to happen or a bad thing to happen?
Both.
Press, please don't intervene.
No, we are live on YouTube, so this is an open house, literally. But to your first question, you would have noted the budget does, it highlights the charging infrastructure in India. So that is one aspect which is holding back EV growth. So that is taken care of in the budget. And I'm sure in the July budget, we'll see the full annual allocation. It should be very big, very significant. Well, FAME is being redone because of the issues so I'm sure soon we'll have a new version of FAME which will suit industry and also take care of any so-called misuse by certain parties. So that should be back. And with EV charging getting a big push from Government of India, I think this sector is going to really take off in the country. Narega is, again, it's as a country develops, its social security net needs to expand. So we still don't have pensions for all, which at some point we must have as a developed country. So pending that, Narega is an excellent thing. In fact, people say we should have a similar urban employment guarantee scheme. And so giving more money, finding more money for Narega is good. Ideally, nobody should be unemployed, but no country in the world can claim that. So,
Thank you, sir. We have Mr. Pawan Khaitan, the Managing Director of Quantum Papers, a very prominent paper manufacturing company. Pawan, would you like to ask a question?
Thank you, Karan sir, for your presentation. Your astuteness as an economist was clearly visible. My question is that we are entering a path of glory where Indian economy is concerned and heading towards a 5 trillion, 7 trillion, possibly 30 trillion by 2047, becoming a developed economy. Seeing the push of technological advancement and digitization and AI, which can be very, very transformative, how do you see the use of AI getting impregnated in Indian economy and its impact on the way forward? Because obviously there are challenges as well as opportunities, and AI intervention will throw up both of these. So how do you see that impacting economy going forward?
thank you, Mr. Khaitan. This is a question well beyond the budget. So it'll be difficult to give definitive answers. But like IT and the digital transformation, AI is definitely going to impact human productivity, human capacity to do things. Will it lead to job losses? Maybe in some places. Every technological change does lead to that. Our state, Ludhiana, is a center for sewing machines. But when sewing machines first came to India, the concern was that, would tailors lose their jobs? Because now one tailor would do the job of 3 people with hand sewing. So every new technology has this, Luddite aspect to it, that will there be job losses? In some sectors there will. Self-driving cars are an example of AI, if you like. And definitely if everybody were to have a self-driving car, certain professions like chauffeurs would no longer be there perhaps. But there would be other professions which would arise as. So in my view, technology enhances human income, which enhances demand for new services, new goods, which come up. So it'll be a big game changer. And I think it's impossible to predict exactly which way it'll take us, but we are in for a ride.
Thank you, sir. I must tell you, Pawan, that in Davos this year, 60% of the discussions by the heads of states and the CEOs and CXOs who were there was AI. So it's a thing which is coming to hit us, and how it hits us positively or negatively, time will tell us. We have among us Mr. Gurmeet Singh Bhatia, Chairman and Managing Director of Ajuni Biotech, who will speak to us about, his.
Thank you, sir. I don't have any question, but a quick comment on the interim budget, which you have also mentioned about farmers and agriculture. Punjab being an agrarian state, our finance minister very rightly pointed out that India is world's largest milk production, but at the same time, this is a fact that our productivity is very low as a global average. We are at 4 liters per milk animals against the global average of 18 kg. She pointed out that that may be the reason that she mentioned about some diseases, food and mouth diseases, which impact the overall productivity of our animals. This is okay. At the same time, she mentioned about few government schemes, local mission and then national livestock mission or something like that. If we strengthen that missions and schemes, the overall productivity of our animals will be improved. But unfortunately, Punjab is lagging behind in that. Punjab has not applied much benefited from these schemes. We are lagging behind. Secondly, as far as fishery or agriculture is concerned, by chance our company is directly related with all agriculture sector in these sectors only. So they have very ambitious targets of 1 lakh crore of exports of fish, and then 55 lakhs employment generation in this sector. In addition to farm productivity from 3 tons per hectare to 5 tons. So these were the highlights of the yesterday's budget, and I feel these initiatives clearly shows the enforcement of the government's intention that they want to boost the income of agriculture farmers through these allied sectors. This is my quick.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have the chairman of the Indian Chartered Accountants of India, Chandigarh branch, Mr. Vishal Puri. So something, because Vishal, 3% of the direct tax collections, 3% people pay more than 50% tax.
Thank you so much, sir. Well, it's a delight to hear from you, sir. Well, sir, मेरा question direct taxes है नहीं, एक और issue के ऊपर था. Sir has spoken about all the various factors that कल budget में discuss हुए थे. I just wanted to know, sir, आपका tourism sector, I think we have forgotten. How do you see tourism sector as contributing to India in future, and what's your take on that? There are some allegations.
Okay, yeah. Do we have another question on the tourism sector? Should we take
I think
both
Manmohan ji,
together?
would you also have a question on the tourism sector? We can answer it together, sir. Manmohan Kohli is the chairman of Aroma, one of the iconic hotels here, and father figure in the hospitality sector.
Thank you, Dr. Karan. First of all, took us to the intricate lanes of the budget, which in today's politically driven interpretations is like going to a doctor who has no interest but tell you, diagnose what is the issue. So thank you for that. I noticed both the points which they have covered in the budget. One is about the development of the iconic places of interest. In that part, I only want to elaborate that until we do not develop a destination in totality, in a comprehensive manner, it doesn't work. For example, if we do not build collateral invitations to a particular visit, it would just be a passing by thing. We have some such examples in Punjab, where you have fantastic destinations, the product, but we have not built around the product. If we see Amritsar today, it got into that same mode in an organic manner. But what they're doing in Ayodhya is what is more organized. So I think in this, if we take a little example from this and develop our destinations, they'll be worthwhile. Otherwise, they'll be just like passing through one of those major buildings and not even stopping. So what we need today in modern India, as much as I study, it's a lifestyle linked visit where people want to spend a night, they want to take their children. The 30 to 70 is an ideal ratio, but there's 40 to 60. 40 is visiting the iconic place and 60% is built around it. So until we don't do that, to my mind, it won't work.
Thank you, sir.
A quick quick point on the highways. See, we have almost 44,000 kilometers, 5,000 kilometers of the national highway running in Punjab. And we have about 8 hours traveling time in Punjab. We have a great opportunity to develop both major highways, 44 and 21, to make them a destination while on the move. It's a different vertical of economy, which brings you instant results in livelihood, in employment, and also indirect gains to the people around the place. So I think Punjab must put its mind to see that how we brand these, how do we sample, how do we package them and bring them to people. Just for a matter, if it's a single location, you are in Punjab, enjoy, would make a difference.
Thank you
so
sir.
much.
Thank you. So I think your question is answered. All I'll say is that even small interventions by the government on iconic tourism will, I feel, go a very long way, because now the infrastructure is being put in place so that people can travel any way they like, stay any way they like.
So Vishal, to answer your question, if you look at Himachal today, it is half of the state GDP in tourism because it's not a all-weather destination, unlike Kashmir and Uttaranchal, which is the Char Dhams. So we need Himachal to become a all-weather destination to improve its tourism to state GDP to about 15%, which is there for Kashmir as well as for Uttaranchal. We have among us a leading ISP light in Kumar Guru. So Kumar, if you can, anything you want to ask about the high-end institutions like ISP, and give us a comment on that, please.
Thank you. But Atul, when Dr. Karan Avtar was introduced more as an academic and less as a bureaucrat, I think the academics in this city are always very happy with that, though I don't think he's less of a bureaucrat. So thank you very much for that lovely presentation. I think for me, this the $1 trillion sort of, the 1 trillion rupee fund, which is the innovation fund, and I also think that because there is a fair bit of announcement that comes, and it's also an election year, we understand. But the Anusandhan Act, which just got passed in the previous session, while it is being made into an act, but it's also yet to sort of get operationalized. Do you have a sense of where all of this will lead to in terms of, is there a mixed use or is that going to be still a separate one? Do you have any ideas or thoughts on that? Thank you.
So as you know, the Indian Patents Act has been amended from time to time to satisfy the requirements of global treaties that the government of India has been signing on patents. And the new law, what I can see, it solidifies or codifies all that, brings it all in one place. And I believe it will address the concerns of foreign participants in Indian research. So if you're a multinational pharma company and you want to do clinical trials in India, the new legal framework will address that. And that I guess is not the clientele for the fund, because the fund is for Indian research. But both aspects, when they're tied together, I think will lead to a big jump in R&D in India.
So we have a leading light from Himachal on green buildings and entrepreneur who's done really well for himself, Colonel Pathak, and also Vikram Hans from the from the renewable sector. So can I ask Colonel Pathak to just comment or ask a question, and then Vikram, you.
Sir, I want to discuss this Kaushal Vikas. I think it needs to be revamped. Whatever it promised, it is not being delivered. And you say, and everybody says Manrega, then we say lack of jobs, and then exodus of youth from Punjab and Haryana, legally or illegally. And industry, we all suffer shortage of manpower at every level, from a basic helper till technical. Whatever these teaching institutes are doing, industry is not happy with that. So how we can improve our Kaushal Vikas or education system so that this exodus stops and we don't have to import labor from Bihar and UPs.
So on observations, without answering your question, humans, to me the 21st century is the century of migration. So since it's easier to move now, you can catch a flight from anywhere to anywhere. I think humans will move wherever they want to, for a better job, better life. So we're not going to stop that. And so even within the country, I would welcome people moving for a better job. For example, I can't imagine the Punjab industry surviving for a day without enough people from outside Punjab to do everything that gets done here. There is a saying in Punjabi, very humorous one, which I will, maybe over a cup of tea we can share. On Kaushal Vikas, I feel the union budget makes ample provision. Implementation issues, it's a state scheme. And yes, there are implementation issues. But that is across the vocational education, vocational training sector in India. We tend to do very well with higher education, which is degree oriented. We don't tend to do so well with technical education, where I feel we need to learn from two examples. One is Germany, and the other is Japan. And in my career, the people here who know more, Mr. Tejveer Singh is sitting here, the government of India has actually tried very hard to crack this problem with a fair degree of success. In the last few years, we've had lots of skills universities set up. Himachal has one now, which are addressing this issue. So it's work in progress, but it's definitely well budgeted, well funded by Government of India.
This is Vikram Hans here. Wonderful presentation, sir. I think this is very enlightening. First, I would like to make a comment. This was an opportunity when there was a major push being given to 1 crore solar installations on households. We could have built a circular economy around solar, EV and storage. Because already on the solar front, we had established it. We are way beyond the proof of concept where bidirectional energy movement was possible, and it was happening very successfully. And while EV is a very big source of storage, we could have also used a bidirectional movement of energy back to the loads when EV is not being utilized. So this is just a thought, and I thought this was a great opportunity to push both the sectors together. The second part is, sir, using yesterday's budget as the baseline, which three pictures would you like to redraw for the budget coming up in June, July?
Oh, okay.
So your EV point is very interesting, very innovative. So if I understand it, you're saying that if I have an electric car and I'm not using it for a couple of days, I charge it, then I charge it in the daytime with solar energy, and at night when the grid needs the solar, I discharge it and get paid for it. Wonderful idea. Takes care of a the storage technology issue. Three things. Well, I think I mentioned more than three things when we were talking in terms of, so these are not popular things, so that's why perhaps I can say them. I would like to see the defense and national security budget of India go up a lot. And I did say it's because I'm more concerned about the water. It's not like, I'm not a warmonger. I'm not saying India should go to war. No. To guarantee peace and to guarantee water, I feel we need a much bigger defense budget. So that's the toughest one, because defense, as you know, is the biggest item in the union budget. How do you take it even further? And then agriculture is the other one. And the third I mentioned was East India, yes. When my senior colleague here made me the finance secretary of the state a decade back, one issue I took to the then Union Finance Minister was have a scheme for Eastern India to grow paddy to save the water of Punjab. So that hasn't happened. I'm an old man now. So Mr. Subodh Agarwal is sitting here. He might remember that. These are the three things I would like to see. More defense, more agriculture, because that's the base of the country. So.
Thank you, sir. Former Chief Secretary Subodh Agarwal, sir.
No questions as such, but just taking off on what was said on tourism, Mr. Manmohan ji made a very important point that tourism requires not just the destination, but do things around the destination. And one thing which I have noticed as a tourist, not as administrator, that unless we improve sanitation in our tourism places, nothing is going to happen. And this is also the feedback I have from a former classmate who's working in the tourism sector. So I think, and I suggested it to our colleague Rakesh, who's in the tourism ministry, that let there be a tie-up between tourism and Swachh Bharat, so that resources and attention are focused on. Like Agra, for example. The Agra city is in a total mess. You can see Taj Mahal, but what do you see apart from that? So something needs to be done. Secondly, technical education is a complete mystery to me. You mentioned about something that you had seen at entry of the service, and at the end again it remained the same. I forget what exactly the oil seats. And same is true of technical education. I have been hearing this about improving the skill building. For some reason it doesn't happen. But I would just take your mind back to what General Jacob did when both of us were working with him. He got hold of a retired army officer, handed over we paid him some allowance and put him in charge of the ITIs. And he transformed them just by bringing his experience and expertise and guiding as to what equipment and what curriculum changes were needed. So we have this vast resource available, particularly in Punjab. Should we not make use of that? And finally, on innovation, after retirement, I have been working, say, in the environment field for quite some time. And what I found was that there are a large number of promising technologies which can address a lot of difficult issues. But the governments cannot make use of them because the government system for procuring services is through a competitive route. So if you are looking for, say, a technology to clear, let's say, Buddha Nala, you will only allow those people to bid who already have something which is proven and functional. You can't just ask A, B, and C who may have done something good somewhere to bid for that. So I think some kind of a technology trial fund is perhaps very necessary, so that a few key, smaller projects could first be awarded on maybe invitation basis, and the performance of those technologies studied very closely by the appropriate institutions and government agencies, so that these people then evolve into proper solution providers. And if a few years later the government requires such services, they are able to bid for them. So I think something on this innovation side needs to be done.
Thank you, sir. We have last two questions, please, because I've been told to close out. Can I ask Lalit Bansal, leading promoter of agri-chemicals and specialty chemicals, Saraswati Agri?
Good evening, Karan. I think, thank you very much for the crisp and budget information. My question is related to agriculture. There's a lot of talk regarding organic and inorganic agriculture going on these days. Is it sustainable to be self-sufficient in food grains and also be able to export food grains out of India? Just on the organic sector, or it's better to focus on more sustainable use of inorganic material in our country?
So, to me, clearly the budget focuses on carbon neutrality for agriculture, not as such on organic. So, I think organic agriculture is being promoted by Government of India for certain niche areas, niche crops. As you rightly said, the food security is very important.
Thank you, sir. Samir, maybe a question on the services sector. We haven't moved on IT. The Infosys head here is Samir is here. Samir, would you like to say something on the services sector in particular? And last, Manish, on your defense, where 6 lakh crore have been out of.
Thank you, sir, for inviting us and taking out time for this balanced analysis of the budget and economy. Sir, government has a lot of focus on technology, and it's leveraging technology for all its activities, be it social sector or giving services to the citizens, or even financial inclusivity. There's a lot of focus, you talk about the semiconductor industry where there is investment. So I just want to seek your views, how government can leverage technology further to provide services to citizens for poverty eradication. I think that's the area where there's a lot of scope and we are still not leveraging it fully.
One simple one is the space mission of the Government of India. And the GOI's plan to launch multiple communication satellites. I think in the next 3 or 4 years, we'll see those satellites. And we'll see a 5G, hopefully a 6G rollout in the country, which I think will give you and others like you infinite bandwidth to reach everybody. So,
Manish, a quick last question on defense, please.
Thank you, Mr. Atul. Thank you, Mr. Singh, for a wonderful presentation. As far as I fully endorse your view that the defense outlay is very less, very minimal, if you are comparing with the unfriendly neighbors in our vicinity. So from your viewpoint, how we can increase our defense outlay in the futures to come? On the other hand, we are speaking about Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India, and speaking about trillion economy that can only grow when the defense grow in India. And second, just your comment and view on this thing, that whatever the budget may be, how can the industry within this part of India can encash those budget outlay in terms of their diversity plan, sir?
Okay, tough questions. I think the first one is fair because if I advocate more outlay, where is it going to come from? Frankly, I don't have an answer. But you know, as the GDP grows and the tax base grows, there will be room for expansion. So let's hope that happens. The second one, again, I'm not the expert. In fact, you all are the experts on how to leverage, but I do see the big outlays in infrastructure as a big opportunity. And in fact, a lot of it is being invested locally in Punjab, Haryana and Himachal. So that's, to me, is the biggest business opportunity.
Thank you so much. We have a lot of more questions, but no time. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Karan, sir. May I hand over to an anchor?
Thank you so much, sir, for such an enlightening and interactive session. May I now request Shri Anuruddh Tiwari, IAS, Special Chief Secretary cum Director General MGSIPA, and Shri Amit Dhaka, IAS, Director MGSIPA, to present a token of appreciation to Dr. Karan Avtar Singh, sir. And to Mr. Atul Gandhi, sir.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for this marvelous exposition and your lucid style and the elucidation that you provided for such a complex topic is indeed very impressive. Personally speaking, sir, I have always been a beneficiary of the storehouse of knowledge that you carry, and I always say that every session that I have with you, I end up learning something new from you. Thank you so much, sir. And I must say that Atul, you have been great in conducting this session, and thank you so much for, I know for you in KPMG this is the busiest time of the year, but you agreed and conducted this session. Thank you so much. What I see from this presentation, couple of points. First of all, and what gladdened me was that the country is firmly on the task of fiscal consolidation, something that I and Karan sir very often talk about. And this is something that we have been concerned about, we've been writing about it, and this is something that we're very happy to see. The second point that I thought was very important for us was the increase in capital expenditure. And what I believe is that this certainly, with the reduced fiscal deficit, would certainly lead to greater private investment. And certainly, public investment does nudge the private investment both sectorally and spatially. The third point that I thought, which Karan sir also highlighted, was what we said was Gyan. The focus on Garib, youth, Annadata and Nari Shakti. I think that is something that we as a country really need to continue to focus on during Amrit Kal till 2047. And to my mind, if we have to really look at the $35 trillion target that we have set for ourselves, and Karan sir mentioned that if we have to really become a developed economy and have our per capita income at $10,000 in the next 23 years, there are I think a couple of points that we need to really look at. And one of them has to be the increase of women in the labor force of this country. That is something that I think is very, very important for us. And I do hope that the next budget, the full budget that the new government would bring in, would certainly have something on this. Personally, if somebody were to ask me, the big tick for me, that was fiscal consolidation. I am very happy about it. But one thing that I would really like to see more is a direction on agriculture. I think that's something that we are missing. To my mind, if we are really looking at those targets of 35 trillion, then we really need to grow at, as Karan sir said, at 8%. And if we have to grow at 8%, we certainly can't have the agriculture really growing at below 4% in any case. 4% is something minimum that we would need to be targeting at. And if you look at what has happened in the last 20 years, we have been growing at around 2%. And we really need to double that up. And I think those are targets that are achievable. And I'm sure we would see these coming in the budget, the full budget that we would have in the coming, in July when the new government takes over. I must also thank the wonderful audience here. You've been great. And thank you so much for coming in. Your presence here really encourages us as MGSIPA to continue with these sessions. And I'm sure going forward, we would have some more interesting sessions coming up for all of you. Thank you so much for coming over in this evening also. And thank you so much, Karan sir and Atul. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now request everyone to kindly join us for a cup of tea outside the auditorium. Thank you very much once again.